Welcome to Price Plow. My name is Mike, and today we're going to talk about, this is a video I've wanted to make for a very long time, my favorite herb. Ever since I started working with supplements in the 2000s, Rhodiola. Now, Rhodiola is an adaptogenic herb, and before we get into all the crazy details, because this video is going to be a little bit in depth, as you could probably tell from the video length, the main benefits right off the bat are generally going to be, first off, most people are here for the mood enhancement. And underneath that, a second little subcategory I would call anti-anxiety effects. And we're going to have to be very careful about making any claims. You're going to have to doctor up and everything if you have any sort of clinical issues, because we are not curing or treating any type of clinical diseases, but there are antidepressant effects that have been demonstrated in some studies as well. So a lot of people are here to discuss mood enhancement, and that's one benefit that you can get from this incredible adaptogenic herb. The second is going to be anti-fatigue effects, both physical and mental. And so there are a lot of great research studies showing that Rhodiola can help improve your resilience against different types of stress. And that goes for both like endurance type sports, or I guess you could say endurance type studying, for instance. And I believe that there's an anti-cortisol style effect, but there's also more going on than just that. Way at the end of the video, we'll talk a little bit about some of the mechanisms behind the scenes, but I just kind of want to kick off with some of these benefits. Third, we're often going to see benefits with relation to nootropics, focus, cognitive focus, whether in the face of damage or trying to protect our neurons, or just using it as a study aid for that, like I said, study type endurance effect. And so there's a lot of really cool research coming out showing the different constituents of Rhodiola that can help with our focus effects. And then finally, there's a bunch of other auxiliary benefits, such as blood sugar control or like anti-diabetic effects, or there's also organ protective effects, and then some other auxiliary benefits that we can quickly discuss as well. But most people are going to be here for the feel-good, virility, and mood enhancement. And as we're going to see, there's different forms of Rhodiola, different types of extracts that are out there. We have ours that we believe in, but we're going to be showing you some different types of formulations where we can combine extracts to get the best of both worlds from all kinds of Rhodiolas, because not all extracts are the same. We'll talk about the constituents inside. So before we go any further, I will say that this video is sponsored by NMB Nutrition, who has RhodioPrime 6X. This product was sent for free, and this is a 6% SALIDROSIDE Rhodiola extract. So it's a little different than some of the stuff that you might see out there. And we'll talk about why this is, but the long story short is that we told NMB Nutrition that they need to create this ingredient because there's not a lot of quality Rhodiola extracts out there, and we feel something hard when we take a high SALIDROSIDE extract. So I'm gonna put my mouth where my money is, and I'm gonna take me a 250 milligram capsule right off the bat. And so we're going to we're going to see how this feels. But I am a huge fan of this herb, and I've been waiting to make this video, but there haven't been that many great extracts on the market until now. And I think we can combine some extracts to make an even better supplement than we've ever seen on the market before. So that is my general introduction to this video. And as of right now, there are not any supplements, as I record this in March of 2021, there aren't any supplements that actually contain this ingredient, but I know that there will be a few. And a lot of times with NMB Nutrition, Alpha Lion puts out their supplements in their Gains Candy series. And so maybe we'll get them to do a RhodioPrime Gains Candy if you want to try this SALIDROSIDE based extract that is far different and feels pretty poppy in my opinion compared to what we have in many of the other extracts. And if you don't see a standardization strength on your Rhodiola supplement, it might not be that good. It might, but it probably isn't that great. And so that's kind of one of the things that we've come to learn. So Rhodiola is an herb, and it's an adaptogenic herb, helps you regulate levels, but it's an herb that's grown far up north in the Siberian regions and the Scandinavian regions, and it's been used in traditional Chinese medicine and Scandinavian folklore medicine for quite a long time. And there's even stories, and they seem to be sourced true, that they were used by the Vikings on Viking expeditions. They would use it for the endurance effect mostly, but also for virility. They would give Rhodiola to the newlywed married couples as a virility booster. And in my opinion, in today's day and age, with all the stress that's out there and the social media and the lack of sleep and the subversion in our society and all that stuff, we could definitely use a little bit more of the pro-Viking feel and a little bit less of the, let's just say, not Viking style of life. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I think that there's something really good to be said about feeling better and having a better mood, having less stress and anxiety. It's up to you to, of course, remove stress from your life wherever possible. And if you have a clinical depression diagnosis, then you definitely want to talk to your doctor. This video is not intended for any of that. And in fact, if you're on an SSRI, this ingredient does have some capabilities as a MAO inhibitor, and you definitely should not mix it with a prescription drug such as an SSRI unless your doctor tells you to. So just make sure you know that. However, this is a feel-good adaptogenic herb that helps you regulate certain levels in your brain, and serotonin is going to be one of them, and it feels great. So that's kind of the introduction to rhodiola. It's been used by the Vikings. So we have the old school world coming together with some new world science, and we're realizing that there's some great stuff in these extracts as long as we extract it properly. We like the SALIDROSIDE, as we'll talk, but there's also another portion is the rosavins. And the rosavins consists of three different things: rosavin, rosarin, and rosin. And then there's also SALIDROSIDE, which is, we think, far too underdosed. And then there's some phenolic constituents such as tyrosol, catechin, and gallic acid. You're not going to usually see those on any labels. And then finally, there's also a flavonoid known as rhodionin, but we don't often see that on the label. We're typically looking for SALIDROSIDE and rosavins. I am more on the pro-SALIDROSIDE effect, and I've felt this ever since about 5 years ago. I took a high SALIDROSIDE supplement, it disappeared off the market, and it's finally, we're bringing it back with the RhodioPrime, but there's also something to be said about high rosavins content as well, and I think getting them both is where things really, really start to get fun. But in my opinion, if I'm going to take a high SALIDROSIDE zero rosavin extract versus a high rosavin extract zero SALIDROSIDE, I'm taking the high SALIDROSIDE because that's where I get the more moody, the burst and the pop and the focus. I think there's a little bit of the nootropic energy that comes from that. And so that's kind of my personal opinion. Now let's get into some of the research. Now let's just get it out of the way. Let's talk about some of these antidepressive effects, because obviously, if you are clinically diagnosed with depression, you need to seek help from a medical professional, and there's a good likelihood that they might prescribe to you a pharmaceutical. And in that case, you're not going to want to mix this with rhodiola because it does work as a MAO inhibitor, as I mentioned, and that is going to be the main mechanism for it. Now, there have been double-blind placebo-controlled studies on rhodiola, and there has been a significant reduction, 65 to 70% reduction in certain scores on certain certain depression index type of tests. And so we need to be careful with this, of course, because this is not going to be as strong. And rhodiola has shown significant improvements in mood and antidepressant effects. However, it does not score as strong as pharmaceuticals. My take on this is if you're clinically depressed, you need to find the right kind of doctor, obviously. But if you're kind of just like feeling blah, like you get out of the bed, you're doing okay, you make it to work, you're doing fine, but you're just blah, you're just not feeling the vigor of life and everything, this is an herb to try. Now, if you are like way worse than that, then you might want to try it. That's up to you. Honestly, though, at that point, you seek medical attention. So that's all we're going to say about that. However, so there are studies, and there are double-blind placebo-controlled studies at around the 340 and 640 milligram per day dosage. So these are pretty higher doses than most people need to use, but it does show an antidepressive effect, and it happens to do with the ability to create more serotonin. Now, on the note of serotonin, I think it's very important that we see there's a lot of research studies. I don't want to get into the diet wars too much here, but there's a lot of research studies showing that people on vegetarian and vegan diets who have lower protein intakes have lower intakes of tryptophan, which is an essential amino acid required to generate more of the dopamine and the serotonin and the 5-HTP and all that. So if you are a vegan and then you're having some issues, then you need to look into the diet and you need to look into possibly supplementing or get back to eating meat, because we need the building blocks to be able to create this. Rhodiola can only do so much. If you don't have the literal chemical compounds needed to create serotonin, you're gonna have a bad time. And so I've always been a very big proponent of meat and eggs and fish and everything. And one of the reasons is because it might not be a ton of it, but there is enough tryptophan and it's essential and you can't get it into the diet. So that always comes up, and I always get after too high of the omega-6 inflammatory seed oils and vegetable oils. And I believe they cause a ton of neuroinflammation, and a lot of the soybean oil and sunflower oil, when we have too much of it in processed foods, that also causes a nasty chain reaction that affects our mood and our disposition as well. So keep that in mind. Processed foods, no bueno. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, so there are some studies showing that it has an antidepressant effect, but not as good as a true, real deal pharmaceutical. And that's perfectly fine, because we're not looking for that. We're looking for a little bit of a boost. Now, the bigger thing that works with rhodiola is the anti-anxiety effect. And a lot of people are looking for that effect to happen pretty quickly. The cool thing is that with a rhodiola study, there was a 200 milligram dose taken twice a day. It was a 14-day study, and they showed incredible effects at 14 days, but the effects started to show up as quickly as 3 days. Now, I don't really have that level of issue. I'm sometimes looking for just a little bit something extra, and that's where I get the uppity effect from the high SALIDROSIDE rhodiola. But in terms of anxiety, I believe what's happening is this is a stress fighter. That's what these adaptogens do. They regulate levels and they help our bodies attack stress, and at least they help our bodies handle stress a little bit better. And so when it comes to anxiety, a lot of people are simply stressed out with too much. I believe in more of a minimalist lifestyle as possible. I believe in setting your phone down and enjoying life, and enjoying your meals, cooking your own food, and slowing down and everything. And that's all great and everything. But every now and then, life comes at us hard, and when it does, I love to take 1 capsule a day of this at 250 milligrams, although the study that I'm citing right now took it at 400 milligrams. We're going to see in the rhodiola dosage section that, it's really variable, and it depends on what you're going for. If you're going for, like, you're working your butt off and you're trying to train for a super, like, Ironman and everything, you might want to go in that 500, 600 milligram per day dosage. If you're just looking for a cool cruising altitude, you just need a little something off the edge. Maybe you can get a little bit better sleep once you have the lower anxiety. You might be able to do okay at 100 and 200 milligrams per day. I typically like to start at 250 milligrams per day myself. So that's the quick take on the dosage and the anti-anxiety effects. And a lot of this happens to do with rhodiola's ability to just regulate our mood levels, regulate our neurotransmitters, and I believe to fight a little bit of cortisol. However, you can't deny that there is definitely a serotonin uptick, and that's got to have a nice little play with it as well. We're in this world, we're always, text messages or notifications on our phone. We're looking at dopamine. A lot of times we forget about the serotonin. Sit down, relax, enjoy your meal, enjoy your family, enjoy your life, and go for the serotonin and not always the dopamine. But sometimes it's good to have both. And that's why we're starting to put rhodiola into, and RhodioPrime especially, we're starting to put in some pre-workout supplements, because you have some of the stimulants that provide a little bit of that dopamine feel. I like to counterbalance it with a little bit of that serotonin feel, and it does happen to feel great. Okay, so here in PriceSpot, we are into performance enhancement, legal performance enhancement, and sports nutrition. So of course we have to talk about the physical fatigue fighting abilities of rhodiola. There's a couple studies that we have on our blog post discussing what went down in terms of improvements, but mostly we're gonna get a VO2 max type of effect, as well as a time to exhaustion increase. So you're gonna be able to go longer without getting exhausted. That's what the studies show, and they generally are between the 200 and 500 milligrams per day dosage for those effects. However, there is one study that did 20 days only at 100 milligrams, and in that study, and I'm cheating from my notes here, we had increased cognition, mental clarity, physical fitness, and above all else, general well-being. So I think like 100 milligrams per day is kind of my minimum cruising altitude, feel better. But if you're going for like true athletic ability enhancement, and this is from the above average athlete, they're getting anywhere from, like, let's just say 4 to 7% VO2 max bump, which might not sound like a huge thing, but it's sometimes enough to put people up to the next level. Now, if you're a super duper elite athlete, athlete, you might get like half or 1% better. And you know, that's actually incredible. You'll take that, especially with the what happens over time. People overtrain. I'm not a huge believer in overtraining as much as undereating, but either way, our bodies get broken down, our brains, we get overtrained, our brains don't want to do it anymore. Rhodiola, I believe, can get you a little bit further along that curve, but at some point, if you're just crushing yourself, putting yourself through hell week after week after week after week, then at some point it might come to a crash. But Rhodiola seems to be able to make you not only have the focus and clarity to go longer, but the physical ability to go longer as well in terms of having better VO2 production. So some of the auxiliary benefits of Rhodiola include improved appetite and appetite suppression, but in other cases, and this is where adaptogens get really interesting. For undereaters, it seems to make them want to eat a little bit more. You get a little more voracious and you get a little more of that virility of life. But for overeaters, it seems to suppress appetite a little bit, likely through the serotonin mechanism. So that's what's really interesting about these adaptogens. And a lot of times we talk about another adaptogen, ashwagandha, on this channel as well. And it just seems to put levels back to where they belong a little bit. So it's tough to state like whether Rhodiola is going to make you undereat or overeat. It's not going to do either of those, but if things are a little bit just off, and for whatever reason, if you've ever, I had this happen actually last week. I trained in too hot of water swimming, and I kind of knocked myself out, and I took myself out of the, I overtrained to the point where I wasn't hungry, and that's like a very bad thing. If you're doing that kind of thing, it's going to bring you back to life a little bit, just a little bit. It's not going to save your life if you do anything life-threatening, but you know what I'm saying. It's going to bring you back a little bit. At the same time, if you are constantly, your body's craving foods, there's obviously a nutrition problem at play. And part of it could be that you're not eating satiating foods such as saturated fats or the proteins, the tryptophan that we already talked about, or you're having a general trouble expressing or like connecting to the serotonin, or like, you know, receiving the serotonin molecules. That's where Rhodiola seems to play into effect. And for binge overeaters, it seems to bring things down a little bit too. It's not the strongest research, but it's something to look into as well, on top of some of the blood sugar regulation stuff. Now on this channel, also made by NB Nutrition, we do have a berberine, a dihydroberberine known as Glucovantage, which I think is a far better, incredible blood sugar support agent. So these can be stacked together. I'm never gonna like take Rhodiola for the fact that there's a study out there showing better blood sugar protection. We're going to take something else for that, but it's just a cool auxiliary benefit that it seems to just, it's a regulator. And that's what we love about these adaptogens. At the same time, we're really here for the mood and endurance. Now finally, citing some of the extra research on our blog post, we also have some of the organ protection, and it does seem to be protective for the liver and the heart, which this is important because if you're eating improperly, you're trashing your liver, and in many ways in one, including having too high of a diet and let's say the seed oils, the linoleic acid, and the fructose. There's many ways to protect it. The best way is to get rid of that stuff, but it does seem to be a little bit organ protective. And then in terms of reducing estrogen, that virility, there might be a little bit of a play with estrogen, but these are rat studies, so we need a little bit further research before we're gonna like make any anti-estrogen or aromatase inhibition type claims, but it's something to keep an eye on. And then finally, the C word does come into play, and this is gonna be part of the mechanism, is that hopefully you know what the C word is. I don't even want to say it on this video because we don't have enough thorough research, especially in humans, but there's an anti-proliferative effect of Rhodiola, and the way it works is that it helps regulate the mTOR pathway. And so sometimes the mTOR pathway, which is the anabolic pathway used to build muscle, you take a lot of leucine, you get a lot of good quality meats, you're going to have a better time building muscle. Sometimes the mTOR pathways out of control, and we have too much cell division, and sometimes it is underexpressed and we need more growth, and that's often going to come from diet. But it seems that Rhodiola is able to regulate it and not necessarily always bring it up or not necessarily always bring it down, but bring it back into play. And so the mTOR pathway is one of the mechanisms that it works that a lot of people don't really talk about. So if you're having issues with with cell proliferation, we'll just say, then it's worth looking into, although there's probably stronger research elsewhere, but it's definitely something that is worth considering if you believe that your mTOR pathway and you're not able to build proper muscle, even though you're doing everything right, or things are spiraling out of control. It's worth at least looking into the mechanisms. Go down that rabbit hole and you might end up coming out with something really interesting. It might not even be rhodiola to talk about, but there's a lot of good research studies, and a lot of times those research studies cite other great research studies, and you might find what you're looking for there. So that's just a little bit of the bonus benefits here. But again, we're here for the mood and the endurance and the vigor. So now real briefly on the mechanism, then we'll talk a little bit about dosing and everything, because it's going to depend on what you want out of your rhodiola. In general, we've talked about serotonin already, but the other thing are some of the go-get-em neurotransmitters such as epinephrine and norepinephrine and a few others that we oftentimes initiate during our fight or flight responses and when we want more vigor. And a lot of times and dopamine, of course. And so a lot of times we're either overwhelmed with them or we need more. And the research is seeming to indicate that the rosarin portion of the rosavins helps with that, but it's also the salidroside that helps with some of the energy and get focused right now, like get zoomed in right now, get going right now. It's the salidroside that seems to provide more of that dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine type of uptick when taking rhodiola. And that's some of the issues with the rhodiola on the market, is that too much of it doesn't have salidroside, or it is weekly dosed. So what's really cool is that RhodioPrime 6X, a lot of times we talk about Rhodiola rosea. Rhodiola rosea, the standard dose that you typically would want is 3% rosavins, 1% salidroside. But the research studies seem to indicate that things get a little bit more fun and they get more effective as salidroside gets up a little bit higher. And that's where we said to NMB, why don't you make a high salidroside extract? And they actually use Rhodiola crenulata to do so. Now that means that we are going all in on salidroside, but what you could do is that you can combine both extracts and get kind of a best of both worlds. So my type of dosing in a pre-workout atmosphere, when I'm looking for just go get them, I'm looking for the energy component, I'm looking for the nootropic effect. I'm going for salidroside. 250 milligrams of RhodioPrime 6X feels great before a workout. And that's what we're putting into certain pre-workouts. Hopefully you're gonna see some stuff pretty soon on that wavelength. Subscribe to our channel and you'll see that. Now, a lot of people here are looking for the more relaxing and calming side of things, and they're gonna be looking for a little bit more rosavins, but the salidroside still helps with that serotonin production. And so I believe that mixing a 200 milligram dose of the RhodioPrime 6X with let's just say a 100 to 200 milligram dose of a trusted rosavins containing rhodiola may actually bring the best of both worlds. However, we're oftentimes in a pre-workout atmosphere on this channel, so we're very happy with our RhodioPrime 6X. Everyone we've given it to says, man, I feel a little bit of pop with that, and it's a stimulant-free type of pop. It helps your body create some and bind better to some of the stimulant-based neuroreceptors, but the ingredient itself, I would say, is not extremely stimulatory, but it does feel good. So that's where we're at with the dosing. But in general, 100 milligrams a day is just going to be that cool cruising altitude. Aggressive training, 500 to 600 milligrams a day of a good blend. And pre-workout, like one hit them, one and done, go get them. I would say 200 to 250 milligrams of RhodioPrime 6X with the 6% salidroside is where it's going to be. If you're looking for the more anti-anxiety effects, then definitely want to take a look at some of the rosavins containing extracts. But there's something to be said about the feel-good part of the salidroside that has made us so happy to finally have something out there for some of the nootropics and some of the pre-workouts that we talk about on this channel a lot. Now, the last thing we need to talk about are potential side effects, and that's what's cool is when in these studies where they put it against certain antidepressants that are pharmaceutical, those have far more side effects and are far harder to get off of. This is not something you're going to get a hangover from if you stop taking it. And I don't want to make like claims because everyone behaves a little bit differently, but this is a little bit more milder to get on than an SSRI, let's just say, and it's a lot easier to get off of. You just don't take it and you're probably just going to go back to feeling semi-normal and everything. So the biggest anecdotal side effect, dry mouth, there's some stuff like dry mouth that happens, but I've never really felt that. I've had a few friends who say they get a little more snippy. And so you could take that one for what it is. A little bit of just, and it could be like the virility. It could be like a little bit too much of like the uptake in like norepinephrine or something like that. But I've had a few friends who get a little more snippy, and that is with a higher dose than normal. I've never heard of anyone really having any terrible side effects at 100 or 200 milligrams a day of type dosing. I'm talking about 500 or 600 milligrams. Things get a little bit more punchy. But for me, I don't know. To me, it just gets me to like a slightly higher cruising altitude, and I like to say that a lot. And without having to get reliant on more caffeine, more stims than is needed. So I am a huge fan of it. I do like to pair it with caffeine. It's one of those ingredients that you don't need a ton of caffeine because it comes along and kicks some stuff up for the ride. And turns out that, you know, when you have some ingredients like this, they boost a little bit of dopamine, boost a little bit of serotonin. You probably don't need as much caffeine to get going, but a lot of us are hooked on caffeine, so I'm not gonna tout it as a caffeine replacement, but this is a great ingredient if you are cycling off of caffeine. You need to go stim free, which I haven't had for too long because I have a child. If you need to go stim free, then I would definitely put rhodiola in the stack to feel better while you're getting off of something. And in fact, there was a study showing that rhodiola helped a lot with nicotine withdrawal as well. So these adaptogens do fantastic things. And I'll look at the other adaptogens. If you're really, really hooked on some drug like caffeine and you want to get down or get off of it, then rhodiola and its friends are definitely some of the herbs that are worth exploring. But getting back to the safety thing, so we did see a study as far back as 1985 was looking at how high of a dose they would take to get the mice into a more toxic condition, and they had to go so astronomically high. It's not even feasible to talk about this in human terms. It was 3,360 milligrams per kilogram of body weight for the mice, which is like taking 20 pounds of the stuff in humans. That's where there was toxicity. It's 20 kilograms. And either way, it's such a huge dose that they weren't able to get toxicity at more reasonable doses, we'll say. So honestly, dry mouth and a little bit of snippiness at a high dose might be the biggest thing. It's something that at a low dose, I would feel pretty confident taking pretty regularly. At the high doses, I would say only for like the month of blast and burn before it's like competition time in terms of a higher 500, 600 milligram type of dosing. I'm not going to go over 1,000 milligrams per day ever with rhodiola. So that's like my upper limit, no matter what. Big guy doing big guy things. That's as far as I would go, is 1 gram per day. I've never taken myself more than 750 milligrams, and I felt fine. So that's my mixture of the science and the anecdotal side of things. Now we are going to have some B-roll showing, but I figured I'd show you what the powder looks like here. It's brown powder. It doesn't taste that bad actually. And so assuming that it's pretty stable in some of the powders, we're going to see it in some of these pre-workouts. And it tastes about what you'd think it tastes like. It's a little bit herby, but not too bad. It tastes like a root. And then I'll be honest, there is a slight bit of, I'm not a tobacco consumer, but it seems like it tastes a little bit like what an old school, like you roll your own type of cigarette would kind of taste like, in my opinion. So there's a lot of these plants have similar things in common. And that's where I get a little bit of that, but it brings a nice little earthy feel to things. This is nothing that a flavorist couldn't overwhelm in a good pre-workout supplement or powder, but typically it is taken in capsule form. So we'll stay tuned to Pricelaw.com. You can sign up for our alerts on Pricelaw.com/Rhodiola, and we will notify you when new Rhodiola supplements come out, especially those containing this RhodioPrime 6X, because I am a huge fan of the pop and boost that you get from the SALIDROSIDE, and have long used it for pre-athletic competitions and for when I used to get off of caffeine which hasn't been recently. So that's about it. We check out blog.price.com. You can search for our Rhodiola article. We'll have it linked in the description talking about all these different citations. And that is about all I wanted to cover here. Is a fantastic, fantastic adaptogenic herb with a really cool history of the whole Viking thing and everything. I do think that people should at least give it a shot, depending on what your situation is. And hopefully things are going pretty good out there for you and you don't need to do anything too much crazier than that. Just try to eliminate the stressors and bring in some adaptogens and see how you feel. So thanks again for watching. My name is Mike. This is PricePal. And just watch out for all the adulterated stuff out there. Get it from a brand you trust. Get a trademarked ingredient. If it doesn't say what percent of rosavins or SALIDROSIDE is on the label, then there's a good chance you're just getting some watered down junk. But we really don't know. And that's why we like to have good quality trademark ingredients. And that's what we like to talk about in this channel. So the more openly disclosed a formula is, the better. We are long past the days of having ridiculous proprietary blends that just say rhodiola extract on it. I want to know what's in it, and now you can see the science behind that too. So subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the flip side.
Welcome to PricePal.